All right, welcome again to Social Distillation, the submarine still of the internet, where we attempt to drop the beat and pour by lightning straight onto your brain. What are we talking about today, Samo?
Well, it's our Wheel of Time episode, and you wanted to talk about Nyneave. Now, I will say before we get started, Jason 55 Ward, you left a couple comments on our last one about Nick Fuentes and masculinity and stuff, and we will get to that on our next social episode, which will be uh, coming up here soon. So, yeah, your comment is duly noted. It's very long, so we probably could read it and have a whole episode, but it's we'll get to that. I'll read it in detail and formulate my thoughts, and
Well,
so
I'm
will
I'm
he. Yeah.
curious because I hadn't checked for the comments yet, and I'm curious what the comment is because there is a connection here because one of the interesting things about Nynaeve and why we're using her specifically as an example of the things we've been talking about is she is a great example of toxic femininity. When is it actually toxic and when no, it's just a strong female character,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah, and I would like to throw in the beginning. Uh, some of it looked like you thought we were positive towards Fuentes. We are not. If anything positive we said is that he's a rising force. It's the same thoughts we have about like someone like Tate, Andrew Tate,
Mm-hmm.
is yeah, we respect the fact that they're this major force in the mainstream kind of conversation, but we do not like them at all.
It,
And
so I just farted one of my favorite comedians, and I can't remember his name. Carr, the British comedian, Jimmy Carr.
Jimmy Carr, yeah.
He has a funny take on Andrew Tate, which is he's a 13-year-old's idea of what a man is.
Hmm.
And it
I mean that
occurred to
that's
me,
that's perfectly described right there. Yeah.
Fuentes is a 13-year-old's idea of what a clever pundit is.
Mm, I
So
like that. That's good. That's good.
that I think is so much of what he's appealing to. And I think I referenced it when I brought up Fuentes is a couple months ago we went through an essay called Red Pills Without Roots, and it was about this rise in trad based right leaning, whatever you want to call it, amongst young men, boys and young men, and we've talked about the growing divide with women.
Hmm.
Um, and and I think Fuentes is the kind of person that appeals to that is because these people just instinctively know something's not right here. But
Hmm.
but because we have done such a piss poor job culturally and
Well,
within the systemic education system that they
I'm
don't know
gonna
why.
I'm gonna make an analogy here because when people have troubled childhoods and they're trying to find their way in life, some people make it through.
Mm,
But almost the majority of everybody ends up addicted to drugs or something along those lines because they're looking for something and they don't know what it is. And Nick Fuentes and Andrew Tate and those red pill guys and everything, they're basically the drug of the manosphere. And we're trying to be a better option, but at the same time, 80 if you think we are a better option, help us get past 88 followers,
right.
that's so hopefully we're bringing something to the table because these guys are the ones that are, I mean, take trying to actually achieve something in your life and taking a bump of cocaine. Most people choose the cocaine.
Mm.
And
Literally or metaphorically, yeah.
yeah,
It's the
yeah,
same idea.
yeah. Yeah, we're trying to put in just at least two other voices out in the sphere, and we're two guys, so I'm assuming most of our followers are female. Even though my mom watches us, so thank you, mom. I
Hi,
love
mom.
you. Yeah.
Well, speaking of moms, that is one of the interesting things about this character and why we wanted to use her for this idea that we talked about last time on our last social episode about yes, there is a kernel of truth to critical theory, postmodernism, uh, literary analysis, and critique, and that is the perception, the life experience of the reader. You
Hmm.
know, the river. Help me out,
Heraclides.
Heraclides. My brain is not working today. Um, about but as
Nobody,
I said,
no man steps in the same river twice, and they are not the same man when they step into it. So yeah, that's
you
Heraclides.
you
Yeah,
you are a different person than the last time you stepped into this
and
river.
the river is
So
different.
a great
Yeah.
practical example. You haven't been there in a long time, but the Sand Hill, the old family farm where my dad grew up.
Mm,
It's
yeah.
called the Sand Hill because it is a very sandy bottomed area from when the Great Plains were a shallow sea.
So
And
sandy bottomed, you'd have to put the catfish in a little freshwater run to get the sand out of their system before you could eat them.
exactly.
Yeah.
But that also meant that every time you went there, that river was different because even if it wasn't flowing fast and heavy, it's still flowing enough to move that sand around. And you're a different person when you step in there. That the sand has shifted, you're a different person, you know, when the first time I went in there, I might have been worried about snakes for 2 minutes, and then as a little kid, I'm suddenly, engrossed in all the cool stuff, and I have completely forgotten about that. And then I go there with my kids when they're little, and now suddenly I'm hyper aware of is that stick a stick because I have to watch out for them. You know, I'm different. The river is different, but it's still the same river. It has just shifted, you know. It is still a tributary of the Red River. It still runs along the border of that property. It still has similar characteristics, and I still have similar characteristics.
I need to find it for the cover meme here. It was a two panel meme and it had a river going and the bank had a face and the river had a face. And the river was saying, I'm going to cut you. And the bank is like, whatever. And then the second panel is the Grand Canyon. And
So, but before we really dive into what makes the character interesting and what made her change for us over time, when I was scrolling through the interview database on Theoryland, I came across a couple of original tidbits, interesting tidbits. Originally, and I had heard this before, and I had completely forgotten about it. Is RJ said in the early days when he first came up with the story, and this makes sense because we've talked about how Tam is actually the traditional hero's journey, and we never actually see it. We just hear little tidbits about it along
mhm.
the way. Well, Tam and Rand were the same character in the original concept of the story as it was in his mind as he was starting to make notes and outlines and things. And then later on, he decided, actually, no, the main character should be the son of this person who went on this hero's journey. But the interesting tidbit that involves Nynaeve is so originally Nynaeve was the love interest.
Mm.
He said she had the same basic character of that, you know, strong, sometimes bullying, woman, but she was going to be the love interest of the main character who was Tam and Rand kind of combined. Um, Another funny tidbit I came across is someone had asked him a question about can you expand on the those quote unquote interesting sea folk wedding rituals that Nynaeve mentions in passing when she's talking to the other girls. And RJ's response was, how old are you? The questioner, over the age of consent. Jordan, you're too young. Make of that what you will. Um, and now the other interesting tidbit that starts to lead us into the deeper conversation is let me find this here. So
I think I made it to where you can share. Hold on. Let me make
uh
sure. Yeah, okay, you can.
let's see. So he's in this back and forth with a science fiction book website in 2001. He's talking about how where the different characters comes from, and he reiterates something he said a lot, which is that all of the female characters have some little kernel of varying sizes of his wife. That is where he gets a lot of the inspiration for his female characters is from Harriet, his wife and his editor.
Yeah, well,
Um,
and what people need to know is she helped him write them. So when
exactly.
everybody's like, he's just a guy. How can he know, women? Well, he had help.
Hmm.
He had help.
Oh yeah, there's a really interesting thing there later. Um, And the interviewer says, I have to say one of my personal favorites is Nyneave. And this is Jordan's answer. Well, a lot of people like Nyneave. I've noticed something interesting over the years about Nyneave. I have had a number of women tell me how much they dislike Nyneave. But what's interesting is that when I talk with other people who know a woman who's told me how much she dislikes Nyneave, it turns out that she herself is a lot like Nyneave. What this means, I have no idea.
So
Mr. Jordan, I suspect you do have an idea and you're just being cheeky.
I have the right book up, The Evolution of Desire, Dr. David Buss out of University of Texas. And there is a thing called cross-sex mind reading, which we've talked about in depth. But
Mhm.
there is also another concept called intrasexual competition. And when it comes to females, according to the data, not according to my opinion, according to the data, my opinion is based on the data, is women hate women that remind them of themselves because they feel like it's competition. And because, oh, say you're in a dating market, right? And there's a guy that likes your personality. Another girl with your same personality is your competition, not the girl who has a different personality. That they're not your competition because that guy likes your personality. So it actually makes a lot of sense. I mean, we as guys, we're more hierarchical and we kind of, I mean, realistically, we'll just say we kind of fight it out uh, in lots of different ways,
Yep.
and it's very overt. But under the surface, the other side of the sexual spectrum is very covert, and for lots of reasons we could spend a whole episode going into. But read Evolution of Desire. It's a great book. It's actually a good audio listen too. I think it's only like 6 hours, so it's not too bad.
So we when we went through our reread, and it still comes up here in our overthinking and focusing on particular things, we give Brandon Sanderson a lot of crap for things we didn't like. But there are times where we say, kudos to you. And this is one of them is as I was going along here back in 2011, he was rereading through the series in preparation for starting to write the finishing books, and he was posting thoughts and observations along the way. And so a lot of the Brandon Sanderson comments that are in the interview database on theoryland.com come from things he's posted on Twitter. And a lot of them are from 2011, which is when he was doing this reread. And one of the things he said that was really interesting and insightful to me, and I was like, you know what? Kudos to you because that's a good point. And also a big reason I think why our individually, but are the reader in general perception of Nynaeve changes over time, is he says, as I often post, the way Per and Matt Rand Egwene view her, Nynaeve, distort our perception. But the facts prove her side of things more often. And there's something connected to that, which is let me scroll up here a little bit. And
You want to share it or
yeah, let me share this one because this one is a little lengthier.
yeah,
So this
giggity.
one, yeah, um, all right. So keep that in mind as we look here on this exchange from Twitter in 2011. Nynaeve is a divisive force among Watt fans. Yes, she likes to call men bullheaded. Next time you read, though, watch her actions. She often speaks in a way influenced by her culture, but if you watch her body language and intent, she's a very different person. An excellent example of this is her conversation with Rand in The Eye of the World, chapter 16. She very reasonable, empathetic, and treats Rand as an adult. And as an aside, that section is from Rand's point of view, and that shocks him. He's like, wait, what? Is that that makes him reevaluate one, his perception of Nynaeve, but also his place in the world of, oh crap, and I'm an adult and we're out in the real world now because she's treating me like an adult. And
Hmm. Is that
oh,
after
this is
they
getting serious.
danced
Um,
when they're in Barrelon?
No, it's right before that. It's after she has the private conversation with Moraine and Rand
Mm,
is waiting around in the hallway, and Nynaeve kind of explains some of the things they talked about and basically says, hey, we're Two Rivers folk. We need to stick together, and kind of gives him an, us versus her speech, and so we're going to stick together, and I'm going to stick with you because you're my responsibility. But even though she's saying you kids are my responsibility, as Sanderson said, she's still treating him like an adult.
hmm
But it's you're my responsibility in the same way that that all the people of the village are my responsibility as the wisdom and as a member of the women's council.
hmm
Um,
It'd be like going to a doctor that's younger than you. They're still
yes.
they're still treating you with the utmost care they can possibly give, hopefully. Uh,
Hmm.
but they're not like your father, or your mother. Yeah.
Yep. Um, where was yeah. So this was the really interesting part of this exchange to me. Yes, she calls all men wool-headed. If you want to understand Nynaeve, see these comments as akin to a Sanshin quote, may she live forever. Sure, she means them, kind of, but mostly they're just things you say when you are part of her culture. And then someone chimed in, it's not just Nynaeve, though. There's not a main character who is a woman who doesn't voice these sentiments at least once. Sanderson. That's why I argue it's cultural. Makes sense in a culture where men who have magic are a danger, but women are a resource. Someone else chimes in, I find Nynaeve very annoying. See, she's such an irrational pill. Sanderson, LOL, I can't help seeing her even still as a big sister. Um, and then he cites her thinking when she's sneaking up on Landon Moraine is where this is from. Quote, dresses were not made for stalking. Nynaeve trying to sneak while wearing one. Gender roles are fascinating in the Wheel of Time, for example. Harriet edits, so we're careful not to use non-gender specific terms, fisher instead of fisherman, as that's the preferred what usage. So I that's kind of an aside, but it is still connected to why the gender roles are so good in Watt is because they're not doing it to make a point. It's within the world because of the gender dynamics, because of the taint, it makes sense that they would have gender neutral language.
hmm
They're not doing it to make some kind of modern sexist point. Though finally, the world has blatant sexism on both sides, and yet at the same time, there's far more gender equality than found in most cultures.
You're not allowed to say that because those are not
Exactly.
Western cultures.
There is a quote later on in one of the others where from Harriet, quote, it's a very egalitarian world as far as gender is concerned, in quote. And my note on that is spoken like the female face of misogyny, because right now, according to wokeism, that is misogynistic. The
hmm
way the genders are portrayed within the Wheel of Time is problematic. And when we first started this, you brought up a number of relatively recent essays and blogs and articles about just how problematic in general and certain specific scenes are in the Wheel of Time when it
hmm
comes to intersectionality, critical literacy, etc.
Yeah, and I want to get terminology set in stone here. They kept using the word gender, but there's a difference between gender and sex. And if there was only something in our modern world that made it clear which sex you are, oh wait, pregnancy. Oh, okay. So uh it's who has the bigger gametes. That is by definition. But gametes is women have an egg or lots of eggs, hopefully, and men have lots more sperm, right? So who has the bigger gametes that determines whether you're male or female. And that is across all
Every
species
species that
in
reproduces sexually.
yeah, it doesn't matter if you're a freaking seahorse and you hold the babies as the male. You have the smaller gametes. So, and that holds true no matter if you're born intersex or any of those other, mutations. So that is the definition. We have that. And in the Wheel of Time, they have the male source and the female source. And so I just wanted to be very specific there. We're not talking gender, we're talking
Hmm.
sex. And they're trying to muddy the water because I have to deal with it in school every day because there will be a paper we read in class or whatever, and they're like, "Oh, well, this was an older paper, so they used the word sex instead of gender." And I'm like, "Yeah, because it's right. It there's a difference between the two. It actually comes from primatology. It comes from people who studied baboons. Okay, it's it's you can't just change words.
Well, and that's one of the things that made me want to discuss this is when we first started our reread, you made the point that Nyneave is the most masculine female character in the
And
series,
masculine is gender.
and
Yeah.
that is more of the personality trait when
Hmm.
we're talking about masculinity versus femininity. And she's still very much a woman, but
The
she has
term was
these
invented to
traits.
describe male baboons that groomed more than they hunted. That was the
Hmm,
origination of the term.
interesting.
Yeah.
The That point to me was interesting about her being more masculine precisely because it really spotlights the mentality, the personality, the way of thinking. Because Nynaeve physically is not even remotely the most masculine character in the book.
Oh no, she's described as super short, busty, wide hips, all the things we would she was basically 36, 24, 36, you know.
She's a brick house. Yeah, she is a very feminine, very
Hmm.
appealing looking woman, but the way she acts is very masculine.
Which is funny because can I bring Lan into this? Which is
Absolutely. I think they're connected.
well, because think of all the warrior uh influences that Rand had in his journey.
Mm.
Lan was the most nurturing.
Hmm.
He had actually a huge everybody talks about Lan as the ultimate man. He had a very feminine side to himself. He nurtured the young boys.
That's a good point.
He didn't just protect them. He could have just fought for them. He could have been what's the guy in Game of Thrones? The one that the Hound. He could have been like
Mm.
that kind of character.
Yeah.
He could have just been a protector and but no, he
A-
nurtured them.
And
He helped them grow.
superficially, he kind of is. That would be the analog
Hmm.
for anyone who is coming to Wheel of Time later. The analog superficially, if you were trying to describe the characters to someone who's new to it, you might say, well, Lan is kind of like the Hound from Game of Thrones. Have you seen Game of Thrones? And superficially, you would be correct, but there's a lot more depth to him.
Hmm.
Um, and it is interesting that I don't think I marked it, but now you've just made me think of it, is
Well,
somewhere in one of these threads, somebody makes the comment of I can see why Nynaeve is attracted to Lan. Why the heck is Lan attracted to Nynaeve? Or vice versa. Someone was talking about the attraction there, and I'm like, no, it makes perfect sense to me.
yeah, and it's funny because Jordan played on uh, something that's called the dialectic. Right? We've
Mm,
heard that term right in postmodern theory, but also there's dialectic treatment for things like borderline personality disorder,
mm.
and it's two seemingly opposing things that somehow work together. And so when you see it in postmodern writing, it's they're basically just trying to turn words on their head, basically to get you to believe what they believe. But when you use it in therapy, it actually works really, really, really well for these. disorders that are very difficult to treat because the participant isn't willing, like
Mm,
narcissism or borderline personality disorder. All of it's very, it kind of like turns everything on its head, which is the point in both of those situations. But when you're not well, you want to be turned on your head
hmm.
a little bit. So he used the dialectic to have the ultimate manly man, but he's got nurturing qualities, and the ultimate feminine mother who has masculine qualities. So it was actually brilliant. Personally, I don't know if he did it on purpose, but it was brilliant.
Um, I think I think he did it on purpose, but I don't know that. I think that's probably one of those things that he intuited that we talk about a lot of,
Yeah, he
because
didn't
in
have training on it. He just kind of did it naturally, like Arnold in strength training, right? Yeah.
yeah, and he talked in, if you go through the interviews, you'll see a number of times where he brings up how he was just a voracious reader
Hmm.
of anything that was even remotely interesting to him, from, how does a classical, windmill work versus how is a modern skyscraper built. He was intrigued by both.
Hmm.
He mentioned several times the blacksmithing scene that I love from the end of Dragon Reborn. Is he had read previously. That wasn't something he studied to write that scene. It was something that he was just interested in and had read about before, of how classic blacksmithing works. And and so, you know he read so widely that who knows what he knew directly versus what was just swimming around back there influencing what he wrote. For instance, how much of this is something that he read versus he intuited just from observing human nature? Is someone asked, and here we are back to the problematic areas of the gender roles, is as Harriet and Sanderson both said, there there weren't traditional roles necessarily, but there was traditional thinking. And that's where things become so problematic to the modern wokeism. And as an example, someone asked about how Land says in the books, and Jordan had reiterated outside of the books, that if Nynaeve dies, and in fact, I think there may be a dream or foretelling from Min about this, that if Nynaeve dies, Land will die.
Hmm.
And somebody asked about that, and Jordan pointed out, well, he has had the bond severed, so he has already lost the will to live. Nynaeve is literally the only thing that is giving him a will to live.
Hmm.
So if she dies, he's dead.
Which is
That
a very brilliant literary device because men commit suicide when they lose purpose, and his bond was a the representation of his purpose. And
I, I I don't remember if you brought that up when we got to that scene, but that's exactly what Egwene says to Myril.
mhm,
Is, you've done all these things, but you can't do the one thing he needs, which is give him a purpose. Those are the words she uses. Is,
mhm,
he needs a purpose. Nynaeve is his purpose.
mhm, yeah, and it's the only thing. It's basically a caricature of what keeps men alive. If we're not fighting for something, we're just dying slowly.
Mm.
If we're not fighting for something, we're dying slowly. And I think that's a big problem in modern society is everybody's gotten so complacent that you don't have to earn anything, and men are just kind of floundering. You see that in the
Mm.
45-year-old accountant that wants to, you know, just take a long walk on a short pier. It's just there, and these guys are walking around with blank stares.
Here is why Jordan is so great as a writer, and why The Wheel of Time is so great as a story, just not only in general, but in this idea of gender dynamics. Is the point he was making to this questioner is, don't think that means that Lan loves Nynaeve more than she loves him. They both love each other very much. But as he says, and again, here is where things become problematic because even in complimenting women, this is still problematic because you're pointing out a difference. Um, if she dies, this quote, if she dies, he really, really has no reason to stick around. As for Nynaeve and Lan dying, women are always a lot tougher emotionally than men are.
Well,
Nynaeve will cry for a very long time when Lan dies, and she will go on living.
I might look it up while you're talking later, but there is data that if the female partner dies, the man dies very much sooner than if the male partner
Uh-huh.
dies. And it's not that they don't care. They grieve just like everyone else. It's that there's so much more to the female sense of purpose in life, especially if they have
Yes.
kids and grandkids, than there is to the male purpose in life. The male purpose in life, okay, let's look at jealousy. Let's bring jealousy into this. Female jealousy is, are you going to leave me stranded? Male jealousy is, I need to be there all the time and mate guard you. So if one dies, you've lost your purpose. If the female dies, you've lost your purpose because what is there to guard? If the male dies, I mean, there's no one to leave you because they passed.
Hmm.
It's just, yeah, okay, so natural things happen, and okay, we can get over that. And it hurts and it sucks, but there's a different underlying motivation to it. And if you lose your if you lose your partner and your whole life was that person, that hits different. And Lan fell in love with Nynaeve, and realistically, he fell in love with Moiraine first in a different way.
In a platonic way because she was a fellow soldier.
Hmm.
Just a her weapons were different, but to him, he recognized a fellow soldier in this war against the Shadow.
And he realized at that point when they met, if we go to New Spring, is I am this thing. I am not a partner. I am not a husband. I am not any of this. So I need the purpose of being this person's partner in a mission.
Hmm.
Instead of so that they had a common goal was the thing. We've talked about this before, common values, common goals, and partnerships and stuff. They had a common goal. Now he was hitting side of the head when Nynaeve came into the picture, but at the same time, that was his bond with Moiraine, was they had a common goal. And the bond for the warder is the representation of that idea.
It just occurred to me we never see it, but I think we can infer that as good as she is at guarding her thoughts and feelings because she grew up in the court in Carheen and then went to the White Tower, she can't completely hide her feelings from Lan. I wonder if one of the attractions to Nynaeve was how she kind of put Moraine off balance and impressed Moraine. Moraine didn't show it. You kind of hear about it, infer it later that she actually had a high deal of respect for who Nynaeve was, but more importantly, who she could be. And I wonder if part of if Lan feeling that is part of what initially attracted him to Nynaeve.
Well, okay, so let's go back to the work of David Buss right here. Uh, the one of the best ways to attract a woman is have other women attracted to you. And back to our previous part of the conversation, other women that are similar becomes a competition.
Well,
I mean, we fight as men. We will just go out and just be like, okay, we're a lot alike, and these girls like us, and I'm attractive, you're attractive, and these girls are looking at us. And it's the freaking Top Gun scene in the volleyball game, right? It's we're gonna go out there and just duke it out, and I'm going to win that competition.
mhm.
Women, it's just it's a little different. They're like, oh, well, that person's attracted to him. There must be something about him that is really good. And so they automatically gravitate. The best thing to have when you go out on a night out, if you're a single guy, is other women paying attention to you.
Well,
That's why
that's
the
not even
best
where I was
wingmen are women.
that's not even where I was going with it
Oh.
though, but that is a good point. Um kind of like Birgitti as Matt's wingman, which was some of my favorite scenes in the whole series. But
Yeah, those
I
are
meant more.
fantastic.
I was spinning off more of your point about how much Lan respected Moiraine. So, like for instance, if
Oh no,
if
no,
my
no, no, no. I was actually saying that maybe I
yeah
didn't wasn't
okay
clear. Is on the okay, so on the male side, they're gonna respect the one that they've found the most
yeah
perfect match with. So they're gonna say, "Oh, these women were all paying attention to me, but this is the one that stuck out."
it, yeah, what I was gonna say
Yeah.
is like there's a big difference between if some rando coworker sets you up on a blind date versus if your best friend says, "Hey, I got someone you should go on a date with. I think you'll be a good match." And they're like, "Okay, let's check this out. Let's give this a shot."
Which is why
And that's
dating apps
kind of
suck
position. But yeah,
because they lose that sense of intimacy that you get just from the referral.
yeah, yeah, and the fact that that close companion of Land is Moraine, is a woman, is an Aes Sedai, I think leads me to one of the other snippets I pulled out here, which I loved, which was not directly related, but is related to the meta theme here, which is Jordan in 2005 on his blog answering a question about uh, Dammer Flynn versus Nyneave and the healing of certain things and the differences and how things are similar but different. And he says, quote, "It all ties into that theme I keep harping on. Men and women have to work together to be their most effective."
Hmm.
That is so much of what the whole series is about, but then also where the growth of Nynaeve comes from is when you first meet her, especially if you're a young man or boy reading this series, she's a boss bitch and she's
Hmm.
annoying. She is Freud's overbearing mother. But
Yes.
then the more you see of her, the more you realize, oh no, actually, she's very competent and very caring, and she is doing this for, she might not be doing what you think she should do, but she's doing why you think she should do it.
Which is funny because now that you say that out loud, and you had sent me a text and I didn't even think about it until just a second. Moiraine was actually the overbearing mother. Nynaeve was the good mother.
That's a good point. when when she finally stops is in Fires of Heaven,
And
when
she
she realizes,
learns, yeah,
when
she
she's
figures it out. Yeah.
she's forced to realize she needs to
Yeah,
stop
because she was
this.
shown the future, you know.
She was shown some very bad possible futures, and she realized, oh, I've been
Yeah.
going at this all wrong. And
Hmm.
as she says later, when Egwene questions her of, why are you letting Rand bully you and boss you around? And Moraine responds, because I remembered how you control Sidar.
Hmm. Which is funny
When
because one another character that feels like when you're a young male, that feels like the overbearing mother, but when you read it later, is Cadsuane. And we've talked about this in our when we were reading the thing and going is all she wanted was respect.
mm,
She didn't want to control him at all, ever. All she wanted was respect out of him. And so you have, as a guy, I think it takes time to learn the difference between the two. And that's why you date older women when you're younger, you know?
you know what? That is a really good point and really reflective of Cadsuane's character that you kind of see in Nynaeve later,
Oh,
and also
Nynaeve is the Cadsuane 2.0, is what she
exactly.
is.
And
Yeah.
Cadsuane kind of thinks some things along those lines when we get some Cadsuane points of view.
Well, she
And,
even
and
says she's too much like me and I need to make sure she develops into a great human being.
Exactly.
Yeah.
She is trying to help Nynaeve. She is mentoring Nynaeve, but in a way that Nynaeve doesn't like and doesn't necessarily
Well,
realize she's
we
being mentored.
how many episodes was it? Maybe two or three episodes ago where you brought up the former employee of mine, the
Yeah,
person I
yeah.
was managing, which took everything I was doing the wrong way because I saw so much potential in this person that I was hard on them. And he was like, well, it's because I'm black. He's racist. And I was like, no, 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 no. I feel like you can be like better than me if you just figure a few things out and I can help you. And I think that's the Katsui Nynaeve relationship.
And when you said that about Catswin just wanting respect, and that was what she was trying to teach Rand and instill in him. And one of my favorite scenes in the whole series is after Rand's moment on Dragon Mount when he comes back whole and healed within his own mind, and he has that confrontation with Cadsuin, and yet it works out. It's not a blow up. She pushes back, and I think you can say she's probably it's maybe partly reflexive because she's been doing it for so long because she had to because Rand was such a stubborn woolhead to use Nynaeve's words. So partly reflexive, but also probably maybe let's make sure this is real. And then when he pushes back of, honey, I was 1,000 years old, 3,000 years before you were born. So if you want to do the respect thing, I'm the last Tamarillan properly raised. So you could call me that if you want, or you could just call me Rand. And she kind of backs off and is like, okay, I think we have arrived at where I was trying to get to.
Hmm.
All right, good for you. And I hadn't really thought about it in those terms before, but that's very big on her part to say, okay, you kind of pushed back on me, but you did it in a way that was respectful and in a way that I kind of deserved.
Well,
So I think we're
but
good now.
think of every fight you've had with your wife. The good ones, the ones that came out with a positive result, were like that,
Mm.
right? I mean, I guess any fight with anybody is.
Well, that's a good point because I think I feel like I brought this up a while back when we were talking is that I literally can't, I have to think hard to remember the last fight I had with my wife. There comes a point where you mature enough that you have arguments. You stop having
Mm.
fights and you have arguments because I really feel like it has been
Would you rather use?
almost
I'm
15
just throwing this
years.
out. Would you rather use the word debate than argument?
I like argument better because debate has some connotations of you're trying to score points and you're trying to win.
Okay, yeah, I accept that point. So,
And
as as you just said, scoring points, I gave you a point there.
but but what I mean is that when you're young and you're fighting, um, well, Nynaeve, she is the more mature of the girls, but she's still pretty young and she still has some growing up to do. And she kind of realizes that in The Dragon Reborn, when her and Egwene are butting heads and Elaine has had enough of it and says to Mother, whatever her name was there in Tear, of what do you do with two people who won't stop bickering with each other and they're being obnoxious
Put
brats?
their face in some cold water. Yeah,
Exactly. And Nynaeve
yeah.
goes, "Oh, I've done that a couple of times myself."
Hmm.
Uh, and so, and she is properly abashed because she wasn't arguing with Egwene, she was fighting with her constantly. And later, we see some arguing, we see some back and forth, and yeah, she digs her heels in, and she can still be kind of annoying, but when she's arguing with Elaine later on as they're traveling together when they separate in Shadow Rising, it is more of an argument than a fight.
Yeah. I mean, I've had to do it recently with a friend, just going back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And sometimes you have to say, you know what? I shouldn't have said that.
Mm,
But here's where I was actually correct. And it's not just yes or no. It's never just yes or no. You're just like, this is why I said what I said, and I shouldn't have said it like that. And that's how relationships are, whether it's friends, if it's lovers, if it's your marriage, or if it's your parents, or if it's anything. You have to say, okay, I can't just give you everything,
mm.
but I was wrong to be that way.
Yeah. Yeah.
Nynaeve got good at that by the end, too. She got really good at that by the end, especially after
Hmm.
the scene with when she was in the water with Lan coming down to save her, and she had to break. Well, after she broke the block, after she broke the block, she learned, oh, I have to actually acknowledge that even if I'm right, there's a wrong way to do it.
Uh, I pulled something up here that reminded me the person who made the comment about land was my son because I asked him like with Parrot and Fail, I was like, I want first time reader, younger younger person. I want to know his thoughts, and he was the one who said the number one thing that comes to mind with her is this: what does Lance see in her? I have to assume it's her strong will, but it's not
Don't
like he
don't
hasn't
send
met.
his wife that.
Yeah, it's not like he hasn't met Borderlands women like that too. Not to mention Aes Sedai, who are about as stubborn as it gets. I do like her arc,
Yeah, but
or
the
at least what I've
borderland
seen of
woman
it.
is like that was like rape. I'm sorry. It was.
Well, the Malkiri thing, yeah,
Yeah,
with what was
yeah,
going
yeah.
on with him in New Spring, that was
Yeah,
it
that's
was
that was an
drinking the
interesting
grape
tradition.
juice.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. He's probably I mean we can assign trauma to that. Yeah, it's just
yeah. But he does point out the archetypal mother.
mhm.
And I think that's why he probably isn't as turned off by her initially as we were, because by the time he started reading this, he was already a newlywed with a youngster.
Yeah, except that we have a different idea of the archetypal mother than modern children because there's so much more oversight. I mean, you brought up the
Mm,
work of Jonathan Haidt when you texted
yeah,
me
that's true.
earlier, and I have Righteous Mind right here. Uh, the helicopter parenting started in about the 90s, right?
Mm.
And so we were 80s children and then 90s adolescents. Uh,
Yeah, by the time the helicoptering started, we were already past that phase.
we were past that phase, and the yeah, she looked more like the helicopter mom to us the first time we read this in our teenage years versus what we were used to as, well, just be back by dark, I guess, that kind of stuff. So there is a different perspective there, and that's actually a good insight to have because he grew up in a different world than we did when it comes to parenting. Even as much as you try to do a good job as a parent, it's a different world.
Yeah. Well, but that's something he picked on that I said, you know what? That's a good point and is a big point in her favor that should have stood out more in the early days when we didn't like her is one of the first interactions we see with her. She's incredibly sympathetic. Now, she's kind of curt because
Pushing
she
Egwene
has to
off the
be.
cliff.
I
For those
I
that don't get the reference, that's from the show,
I
which
hadn't
really
even thought of that.
was, yeah,
I
yeah.
had not thought of the show in a long time, so thank you, you jerk. But but oh gosh, now you're making me even more mad because the point I was about to make, because of the nonsense way that they try and trick you into thinking that Nynaeve is killed in the attack on Emmett's Field, you miss one of the best moments, which is, as my son points out, when Rand comes dragging in, literally dragging his dying father. Nynaeve is incredibly sympathetic.
Mm.
Now she's kind of curt, but she has to be. She has an entire village she's trying to heal.
Yeah, but she could take out a Trolloc with a dagger. That had to happen. No,
First female
actually,
member of SEAL Team 6. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
this is one of the lamentations from watching the series is that actress actually had a lot of potential,
Yeah.
and the character had so much potential, and they had to make a statement, and they took that away from her. She could have been the best Nynaeve ever because I actually saw those moments with that actress, and it just, yeah, the writers and the directors and everybody took that away from her. So I hope
Hmm.
she has a good career after this because
Yeah.
she was good. She was.
Yeah. Um,
Gosh, we haven't talked about the series in a long time, and it almost derailed me because now I'm out of my space. because it was so bad.
Oh, well, let me get you back into your headspace because one of my notes here on these on the points from the interview database that
Please be Freud. Please be Freud.
no, Matt.
Oh, damn. Oh, yes. Okay, I'm back.
So
I'm back.
here's a thought that I had from Sanderson's comment about how Per and Matt, Egwene, Rand from since we see so much of Nynaeve early on from their points of view in the writing, that colors our perception of Nynaeve. And as he says, she'll say Woolhead, but then the facts. But one of the other things he said in that exchange is, look at her actions, Matt. I ain't coming to save you. I'm done. And then he turns to Huron and says, well, are you coming or not? We got to follow the girls into the heart of the stone because, I mean, we can't just leave them.
You mean
It's,
Jyland?
yeah,
Yeah,
Huron
yeah,
was the previous
yeah,
sniffer. Yeah, right.
yeah.
So it occurred to me, oh my gosh, Nynaeve is in a lot of ways the female Matt. And I wonder if that's why those two especially butt heads so hard.
Well, we talked about that when we were rereading it. That the parallels between both sides was Rand
Mm.
was Egwene and Matt was Nynaeve.
I'd forgotten we talked about
Yeah,
that.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
because Nynaeve, one of the reasons she can be hard to like, especially early on, is the fact that she is complaining so much. Like as my son said when I asked him his thoughts, is one of the things he doesn't like about her is her whole reason for being seems to be hating Moraine and blaming Moraine for
Hmm.
everything that happened to the Emmett's Fielders.
Which
Yes, but
I was about to
she's
say,
still
which is
doing.
tough because she's actually kind of correct.
She she is kind of correct.
Kind of correct, except that there's an underlying thing that Moraine was being pushed by fate. That,
Exactly.
yeah,
Is
yeah.
she was reacting to the shadow. It was if she hadn't been there, these terrible things still would have happened and no one would have been there to help you.
Hmm.
But the bigger point is, much like Matt, she is still complaining. She's still blaming others. She's still blaming fate, but she's still doing the good.
Hmm. And actually, now that you bring it up, they kind of flip their switches at the same time
Hmm.
because it was in Ibudar both times.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
That
Matt started accepting his responsibility and she broke the block, and she started accepting her part in the world.
she
And
breaks the block. She marries Lan. She's trying to be a a a leader without being a tyrant, even though she's
mhm.
struggling with it. Um,
And he came to terms with the fact that he will be the connection between these empires that need to come together to save the world. And
well, first he just comes to terms with the fact that I'm Tavarin and I have to be a bloody hero that I don't want to be.
mhm,
I mean, that's the first step. And then as he progresses there in Ibu Dar, and this is why, because there is this particular very important thing to Rand and to this whole world that
mhm.
is on me. Um, all right, I have a very lengthy uh Q&A from Jordan that I want to read now that is going to get us in more trouble because it uses the F word.
Okay, so if it's lengthy, bathroom break.
Okay. All right, so this lengthy Q&A is from the Sydney Independent Theater from 1999 and is a great rebuttal to the very modern articles that you brought up when we first started doing this. And this is the back and forth that gave me the thought of there are no traditional gender roles, sex roles from our point of view, from our modern point of view, but there is still traditional gender thinking,
Hmm.
which is why I think is very interesting and why I think it works so well, but also why it's so problematic to modernity. All right, so let me share this because it is so lengthy. I think you'll need to see it. um, we never stop being 13 years old as males,
Yeah,
our
no, from what I
senses of humor
understand from
anyway.
the data, girthy is actually more important, but
Anyway, so this is the question. I see the books in a way you separate the sexes quite distinctly. Have you had much feminist critique of the way you treat the male characters and the way you treat the female characters, and how, in a way, the male characters seem to be have the upper edge? Robert Jordan, you think the male characters have the upper edge? I like this. No, no, I like this one. I've had women come up to me before anyone knew who Robert Jordan was. I've had women come up to me at signings and tell me that until they saw me, they thought that Robert Jordan was a pen name of a woman because they assumed that no man could write women that well. I thought, okay, that's the best compliment I received on my writing, that I was able to get inside the skin of women well enough to fool women. It's pretty good. I have seen feminist critiques. I've seen other sorts of critiques. Some of them made my hair stand on end. I had a woman stand up and point something out to me just down in Melbourne a couple of days ago about how all my women are very eager and ready to take charge, take the adventure, do what has to be done. And all of my guys are trying to slide out the back door. I don't want any part of this. And I haven't realized quite that it was that heavy. I don't think that I've had any really bad critiques. There may have that haven't come to my attention, just as I say a few that had been supposedly writing things that God knows I didn't intend to write or have any meanings I didn't intend to have. Does that answer your question or come close? It does
You know
answer my.
what?
Go
I
ahead.
need to look up to see if there's any connection. Remember the movie As Good as It Gets?
Yeah,
I need to look up to see if Robert Jordan was the inspiration for that
I
because
take a man.
it would have been around that time.
Uh-huh.
Jack
I d-
Nicholson, for those that don't know, Jack Nicholson was a writer, and a woman walks up to him and says, "How do you write women so well?" And he says, "Well, I take a man, and then I take away reason and accountability." That's the famous line from that movie.
and it came
And
out in like 99, 2000, something like
yeah,
that.
I actually am curious if Jordan was the inspiration for that.
But again, I think he's being a little cheeky in his answer here
Yeah,
because
no,
he's
he definitely
clearly
is. Yeah,
an intelligent
a
person, and
little
I think
passive
he
aggressive,
knows.
but
So he's being a little passive aggressive, and he's pointing out kind of what got us on this diatribe of your you're projecting here. There is nothing in my writing that lends itself to your over the top feminist critiques. And in fact, as he points out, I have had people say the exact opposite of your guys suck. They're losers. Why, in a sense, what he's saying is in our modern lingo, we would say, oh, they're girl bossing it up. And again, you brought up the crappy show, and so now I have to, is that was one of the great failings of the show, is you didn't have to girl boss it up in the modern way. They were already plenty tough and strong.
hmm.
Is Perrin just wants to go back home. Matt just wants to run off and have an adventure. Rand is
I'm gonna. He wants to run off and have his kind of
fun.
adventure.
He
Yeah,
wants to go have fun.
yeah. He wants to go have
Yes.
fun. Yeah.
Yeah, not for us, those would be adventures, and to him, those are the kinds of adventures he was thinking of. Because like
It- it-
when we see his personality, his real personality before he gets the dagger and gets corrupted, what is he doing? He's saying, guys, it's a city, a real city, not Bearlawn, which was lame. No, we have huge buildings to explore and all this coolness, and man, let's go check it out. You know, that's to him, that's the adventure, is fun with no strings attached, and no, no, as far as he could tell, possible downsides, because Moraine said we're safe here, so let's go have
why?
fun.
Why is he my favorite character? I don't know.
It's
Who
a
knows?
mystery. Yeah. Okay, so then back to the questioner. It does answer my question. I think, to me, you certainly stimulate and challenge our imagination in your work. However, I don't necessarily think you challenge our concepts of sexuality in the same sense. I believe that in your writing, you very much distinctly keep the females in the female roles and the males in the male roles. And I think in our society, in today's society, we're starting to get very challenged in the separation between the sexes. And Robert Jordan cuts him off, as well he should, because this
Yeah,
is
you're still looking for those
nonsense.
line workers that are,
Exactly.
yeah.
As where are the protests to have more women as crab fishermen in the Bering Sea? Anywho,
Mm.
would you like to tell an Aiel maiden that she's in a traditional female role? Forget
Perfect first line. You could stop there. We don't need any more.
nailed it.
Yeah.
Forget about Aes Sedai. I'd love to see you go up to
Aes Sedai are
90.
the laptop class, okay? The IO
You know what? That's a
maidens,
great point.
yeah.
That is a great point. The Aiel maidens are the ones who are out there protesting to be line workers and coal miners, and then
Hmm.
they go do it. The Aes Sedai are the laptop class. That's a great distinction. Okay. Um, but this is where Nyneave comes into it. I'd love to see you go up to Nyneave before she met any of these people and tell her she's in a traditional female role. I don't think I've got anybody in a particular traditional role. And no, I'm not challenging gender stereotypes. I'm, and again, to your point, this is back before gender and sex got all muddied and confused
Hmm.
in modern parlance. So he's using gender to mean sex. Where was I? Gender stereotypes. I'm doing a lot of things here, and there's only so much I can do. There are other threads, other questions, other things that would be great to write about to put into these books. The only trouble is, would you stick around if it was 22 books and they were twice as thick as this? Well, I would have if you got to, if you were the one writing it all, but
Yeah,
I
yeah.
digress. All right.
Again, girth matters twice as
Yep.
thick.
If so, not only that, I'm not sure you could stand the strain. I have notes on characters, on countries, cultures, customs, all sorts of things. Aes Sedai. I have two files of 2 megabytes or so on each, which is a lot for a text file, by the way.
Hmm.
Um, One's just lists of individual Aes Sedai and information about them. The other is the founding of the White Tower, the customs, the cultures, the sexual relationships among Aes Sedai in training, the whole 9 yards. Everything I could think of that might be useful about them. The story isn't there. None of it is on a file anywhere. There are no charts. One of my cousins asked us, what are your critical path charts? You got to have critical path charts for something this complex. And I said, yes, I do have critical path charts, which that's a technique for story writing, which is basically, bubbles with connecting lines to show what connects to where and how things are going to path in order for you to keep everything organized and keep everything straight. Um,
But even
but even putting them on a computer in 3D, it looks like a mess of spaghetti. If I pull in close enough to be able to see what's happening, I am so tight on that one particular area that the rest of it becomes meaningless. The only way I can do it is keep it up here. I assume he's pointing at his head. So the charts are all up here, the story's all up here, and I'm not sure how much more complex I can make it and how many more threads I can add and still hang on to it. So if I'm going to go into gender stereotypes, I'm going to have to drop some of the things from the prophecies.
which is actually this is a testament to we'll give Sanderson credit because that existed.
Mm-hmm.
That existed and he had to take over that. He had to take over that from someone who had it up here, and I'm pointing at my head,
Mm-hmm.
who is no longer with us. And so there was a lot of up there that wasn't there anymore. And
And
yeah.
I think he is kind of, again, he's smarter than he's letting on. I think he's being a little passive aggressive here, but I think he is speaking of prophecies, he is prophesying what modern art was going to become in a little over a decade.
Mhm.
In the 2012 to 2015, you started to see this, and it really started to ramp up in 2016 of pressing modern ideologies to the forefront of stories rather than what he's saying there all of the massive reams of data just on Aes Sedai and the White Tower, it's all background.
Hmm.
That's why it's so real, because he's not telling you, he's not boring you with the facts and figures, but they're all there somewhere in the back of his mind. And so they're all inferred through the characters and through the descriptions of the world and through their actions.
Well, and let me stay in my lane. I'm going to talk about athletics. Okay, so one of the things I do in my training programs with the athletes especially is I train them how to move. I train them the optimal strategies for moving. They're individuals, right? So they have differences with their bodies, and I have to account for that. But there are optimal strategies that are involved with that. If I want to train a crossover run, if I want to train a shuffle technique. Okay, so we'll say with shuffle technique, toes forward allows you to change direction faster than if you turn the toe out and you do a sachet. Okay, that just exists. But if you happen to guess right and you sachet in the right direction, you might win. But also if you have a different body type, it might look a little differently. But there are optimal strategies, and I train these things to the point where they are automatic. And the person can do the individual play without having to think about that movement technique because their bodies just do it now. And so when we talk about stereotypes and cultures and things, there are the bell curve of what is feminine, what is masculine. If you have a female character and you're writing a complex story, you might stay somewhat in that bell curve because it helps you write the nuance of the rest of the story. Whereas, in the same way that someone would stay in the mechanic that they made automatic in order to adjust to the original, to the uh, unique play that they're doing. We just had a fantastic game on Thursday night, which was the Buffalo Bills versus the Houston Texans. And there's one play I'm thinking of in my head where Corey Lassiter, who's actually a very good defensive back, had a horrible technical error in his movement and he got beat bad. He got beat really bad on a very important play. And had he had had he had that I'll just put in air quotes stereotypical movement mechanic in his head, he would not have gotten beat. Or at least it would have been a lot harder for the person to beat him. And that this guy's writing a complex novel that was 14 books with about 1,000 pages each. You need some heuristics. You need some schemas in your head. And maybe you have a character here and there that bucks the system, like a Geonin, as we talked about. A G. Oh, my mom sent me the pronunciation from the actual audiobooks. It was by Rosalind Pike was a Jianin.
Okay.
So we got how they're pronouncing it, but thank you very much for this for sending me that. But she bucks the system, right? She's basically a man with a vagina, right? Uh, but at the same time, 99% of the females are going to fit in that bell curve of what we consider feminine, right? And you have to be able to do that, or else you can't write the complex novel because there's too many things to think about. And that's what I think he was pointing out in that long thing you read.
It, so your analogy there just gave me a thought of how you parse what he's saying here and the nuance and how you kind of square the circle of, well, what do you mean there are no traditional gender roles? You have, the healer, the nurse is a woman, and it's almost always a woman. In fact, oh crud, where is this? I don't
Scandinavian countries.
no no Scott or Isomorphic, if you're out there, I know I'm not crazy. Somewhere there's this funny little nugget in one of the books where the wise woman in this culture is actually a man, and somebody thinks, what kind of nonsense is this? Who would do that? So
It's in the series? Hold on.
I seem to recall a moment of that, and I want to I feel like it's from Nynaeve's point of view, and they're trying to send her to it. Maybe when they're in Amnesia because of the way they feel about Aes Sedai. I think it may be in that
Mm,
moment where they're like the mother Henna or whatever her name is they have to kind of hide what they do as herbalists because or maybe it's in Tyr when they go to the lady in Tyr of men sometimes take on this role because of the way these societies feel about Aes Sedai, and so even if you're just using herbs, you got to be careful about it. Anywho, but so it seems contradictory on its face, but no, it's paradoxical because to his point about go tell Nynaeve that she's in a traditional gender role. As far as Nynaeve is concerned, she's doing a job, a very important job, and she's the best person for the job.
hmm.
In the same way that the Aiel Maiden or General Ty Lee that Perrin meets later
Or
is
Brienne
just
from Game of Thrones, or yeah.
yeah, she is doing a job and she just happens to be the best person for the job. And this is what she wants to do, and she's really darn good at it.
Yeah. Oh, and in the football analogy, had the receiver just run a go route, Lasseter would have made the play. But in the real world, you don't know where the play's going. And so you have to do the best movement technique for the job. You can't just guess and go. And had we just threw Brianna in one of these
Mm-hmm.
roles in the Wheel of Time as Nynaeve, it wouldn't have worked. Nynaeve needed to have that motherly, nurturing part about herself.
But that is where you see the masculinity of Nynaeve coming through in a different way because she's not an Aiel maiden. Now
Hmm.
she does fight when she has to. I mean, look at the her confrontations with Malhidian.
Hmm.
She fights, and she's a darn good fighter in her way. Even before then, though, she's fighting with Moiraine in a different kind of battle to fight for her people,
Hmm.
right? So the I think what Jordan is kind of saying there is just because you you lean towards a particular role or job or whatever, and you are best suited to that in part because of your gender, does not make it a stereotype. Because all of these people in this world, as you know, Harriet talked about, it's a more egalitarian world because they're all making the choice. Ultimately, that is where we have criticized the disproportionate impact that critical theorists harp on is, well, hold on, if they're making the choice, what's wrong with it?
Yeah, actually, I quoted from Are We Even Equal from D'Angelo and Sensoi last time. One thing I liked about that book was their definitions of the difference between stereotype, prejudice, and discrimination.
Hmm.
Stereotype was having an idea about a certain whatever it is. It could be, male female relationships. It could be, black versus white or so that it's just having the idea. Prejudice was having a negative mental pattern associated with that idea. And discrimination was acting on it.
Hmm.
I mean, those are very distinct differences. And stereotypes exist for a reason because there are norms. People don't like to use the word norm because it implies normal, right? And if you're not associated with that norm, then you're abnormal. But prejudice is having a negative feeling about it. But then stereotype is acting on it. And we go back to the work of Shelby Steele, where he goes, we all have racist thoughts. We all have these negative thoughts. The important part is, do you act on it? And so, yes, we do have norms and we do have these ranges, and that's what he was writing in. It's just too complex. I mean, it would have been. I don't think it would have been an epic series had he tried to do what the freaking show writers did in the show, where it was there was no difference between cultures, there was no difference between people, there was no difference. In fact, that actually to me is inhumane. The fact that you're treating things as a monolith. All black people are this way. All this is
It's also so
yeah.
boring. The reason we like to travel, the reason we go on vacation to somewhere else is to see what it's like there,
Hmm.
right? It- I don't want to go, you know, down the block for a vacation. I live here. I know what it's like. I want to go see what it's like, what people are like in Korea or Taiwan or Poland or whatever.
Or you think do you think there's going to be a difference in culture from someone who grew up in the Sahara Desert versus someone who grew up in Scandinavia where it's freezing fucking cold, right? It, do, of course there's going to be a difference because you just had to grow differently. You had to do different things to survive. You had to, you know, the family is different. The community is different. All of these things are going to be different. And if we can't acknowledge that, then we can't even like get along, really. It's
And to the point about the difference between stereotype, prejudice, discrimination is, and there's nothing wrong with, you brought up the Scandinavia. What is that really funky salted fermented fish thing that
oh, it's
they
like the
do?
basking shark or whatever
Yeah,
that they
and it's
do,
like,
and
no
apparently you like
thanks.
vomit when you walk in the room. Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
weird and gross and stinky, and I want no part of that. But you do you. You know,
So
there's a great example of
I
that.
actually want to try that sometime
No
personally.
thanks.
I love doing food
I
around the world, and I might throw up, but I want to try it. So
I will try haggis. I will not try the funky fish,
so
this
I've
funky
had haggis
Scandinavian
and it's
fish.
actually good, but
Um, but so there's a great example of what we talked about last time, and really, actually, no, let's stick with Nyneave here. Is um, there's that quote that Sanderson had of dresses weren't made for stalking, and Lan has a comment about not only there's people in general can't track me, but a woman, he makes a comment about it. And Nynaeve says, my dad taught me how to track. And he goes, huh, okay. So he comments on the fact that it is odd that as a woman, she is such a skilled woods person. And then he moves on. Because, yeah, it is uncommon. It is odd. It is not normal.
I'm going to
Oh,
say
but
not only
okay.
does he move on, but she gains respect.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The other example I was going to use, because we talked about him last time, Perrin and Fail. There are very few female hunters for the horn. Perrin comments on that. Perrin looks at her a little funny. What do you mean? Especially coming from the very conservative place he came from in the Two Rivers, and then they move on.
Mhm.
The fact that he comments on it does not mean he's a terrible person. He is just making an observation,
Hmm.
and then they move on.
And well, and then you look at the entire world. How many of those societies had queens instead of kings? We had Zenobia in Saldea.
Zaldea.
We had Elaine and her mother Morghese in uh, Camelin,
I don't
Andor.
remember. There was
But
another
also we
Borderlander. I don't
had
remember if it was Arafel or Candor also had a queen. I don't remember
yeah,
which one of them it was.
but also we had uh, a male king of Karheim, but the secession after that had was mixed. So it was now Tyr was pretty one-sided, Ilion was one-sided, but then we have Ibudar with Thailand, and then we have Tanchico had a king, but the Penarch was so basically the head of the parliament was a female. And what did they have in?
You just gave me kind of a final thought here of to Jordan's point about, as he said, the theme I keep harping on is men and women have to work together. You see places like Tyr and Amadicia are incredibly misogynistic and patriarchal because they feel about Aes Sedai the way the rest of the
Hmm.
world feel about male channelers. The way those cultures are not that different from the way things happen in the White Tower.
Which to give a kind of a Uno reverse card to you here, Shanshan had an Empress,
Yeah,
and they feel the same way about Aes Sedai.
yeah.
Yeah.
It's almost like people are people,
Oh my goodness. You got
and
to draw four, my friend.
yeah,
Yeah.
almost like,
Yeah.
and that if you treat them with respect, then they'll flourish. And if you work together, society will flourish. And if you create rigid lines and rigid ways of thinking, you create very rigid, brittle societies. Because we never see how it ends, but there's a clear with the little hints we get from the outriggers, the little snippets we heard about what they might have been, but you get the impression
Matt doesn't
that
have a good time, by the way, in the
no,
out. Yeah.
but I suspect that a big reason for that is because the Sanchin Empire is so brittle, because it's so rigid that when it cracks, it shatters.
Mm.
And you actually see an element of that within the stories, because remember when Simirhaj is telling Suroth that no, you can seize the throne because there is no throne. Once Suroth saw killed the Empress and her family, that whole place just fell apart into madness and chaos and death and war. And I get the impression that because of the revelations of the Soldam, that's something that's going to happen and be part of the upheaval in the next age is dealing with that because again that is a very brittle society. It's one of the reasons
Well,
Galad
it's the
grows on us so
freaking it's
much.
the Soviet Union falling. I mean, because that was like a forever process and then a day. It really was.
Very slow then all at once.
Mm-hmm.
But my point about Galad is one of the reasons we talk so highly about him in the his later scenes is that's kind of his whole point with the White Cloaks is guys, we have been thinking way too rigidly, way too long.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not sure that all of the things we have been doing were actually correct.
We need to do a whole episode on Galad. He in this last reread we did, he is the one that stuck out the most to me
Very much
as a
like
character I got wrong.
very
Yeah.
much like Nyneave, as when you first meet him, you
Mm.
do not like him, and you have reason not to like him. Jordan writes it in a way for you to not like him. And then you start to realize why he is the way he is, and more importantly, who he really is. Because much like our first impressions of Nynaeve come from the kids
Hmm.
and their perceptions of her.
Well,
Well,
I'm gonna have
our
to break down
perceptions
his
of Galad
childhood.
come from Elaine and well, primarily Elaine. So
Yeah, I'm gonna have to break down his childhood because remember he was born of a different father than Elaine and Gawain.
well,
And he was always in that phase of trying to be what he thought his mother wanted. And you talked about Freudian stuff. We got a lot of shit there. And again, something I think Jordan accidentally got wrong. Or excuse me,
mm.
accidentally got right. Accidentally got right. But
Well, there you go. There's unless something else pops up, we can do that next time because I think that pairs very well with Nynaeve.
oh, it
Because
absolutely does. Yeah.
because you see with Nynaeve what could be toxic femininity, but develops into to pure, great, noble, aspirational femininity. And Galad, you see some toxic masculinity there, or you could see where he could become like someone like Balda, and yet he doesn't.
Yeah.
He becomes someone much better.
Hmm.
And so I think there is a very similar. arc to those two characters and similar lessons to be learned.
That's all we have, I think.
All right,
We've
then
we've gone we've gone 2 hours, I think. So
oh
we
wow,
we've been
geez.
we've been doing good for like an hour episodes, and I think we just rambled this time a little bit, but we had a lot of stuff to say, and I don't think there was any wasted time in there. So
I mean, it's she's a great character and a great story, and there's a lot to pull from it. I mean, that's why we're still here to still doing this. And next time, social episode, we will get into the lengthy comments from our new commenter and go into
we got to do
what we think
Epstein.
about
We got
that
to
on
do
that
something
stuff.
Epstein
Yeah, there's that too.
because all
Yeah,
those files are being released. I think was it like 2,000 emails got released.
it's all
I don't
nonsense though.
have time to read them. Maybe we have to wait on that one, but
I'll tell you why I think it's all nonsense on Wednesday, but remind me it's nonsense.
well, it's there's a lot of distraction there. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, we'll do that next time.